Welcome. All right, so you made it all the way to the summary video, which is awesome. I hope going through all these videos really helped you out, and you have a better footing for completing the square or solving by completing the square. What I want to do in this video is just kind of go through some common mistakes that I see within my classroom and my students, as well as kind of some tips and tricks kind of always to remember. And really, actually, the tips and tricks kind of go exactly with their mistakes. So I'll start with the mistakes. One of the first things that I see students do is not setting a equal to 1. If you have a is 2 or -1, you have to factor out that value. Set your a equal to 1 or at least to a squared term, because you have to produce a perfect square. And if you don't have a perfect square for your a, then you're going to make this problem much more complicated than you ever want it to be. So you have to set your a equal to 1 to create a perfect square. The next step that I'd say the next biggest mistake is students that don't factor their perfect squares. So if you have a problem factoring perfect square trinomials, please make sure you go and check out my course on factoring perfect square trinomials, because it is essential for you to be able to complete the square. Remember, a perfect square trinomial would be ax squared plus bx plus c, where a and c are square terms, and b is equal to 2 times the square root of a times the square root of c. So to do a perfect square trinomial, you have to make sure your a and c are square terms. And when looking at this, a lot of students, they just say, I have no idea how to factor this. But the very common, once you have a perfect square trinomial, you have the square root of ax plus or minus the square root of c. And it all depends on positive or negative if your middle term is positive or negative. So knowing how to do that very quickly is one of the common mistakes that students, they can complete the square, they can do the b over 2, but then they get stuck on how to factor them. As far as like some tips and tricks that I would see, I was trying to think of these, and the main important thing that I would have is making sure you set equal to 0. It's not really a trick, but setting that equal to 0, and sometimes here's actually well, no, that I was going to think of. One of the factors I also like is set equal to 0, making sure you can factor out terms. All right. A lot of times students don't like to have terms, and when they factor, so factor something out or multiply everything by 2. So when you do your b divided by 2, it's something that's easily factored. So make sure you also know how to factor very well. And tips and tricks, knowing you can do the perfect square, and I'd also do knowing your square root method. But I don't really have any great tips or tricks for completing the square. It's really just following along the process and going through it. But those are some of the common mistakes that you will find. So make sure that you can brush up on those. Thanks.